Hi everybody and welcome back to the arcade. Today's video is going to be a little different but definitely special, so stick around. My major resolution for 2024 was to make bigger and better content for all of you. So in an effort to live up to that resolution, I reached out to another creator on the platform, SawmanUK, and I pitched him on a collaboration, which is what you're about to see. We discussed all things MMOs past, present, and future, and a few other fun things like the definition of RPGs or content creation moving forward. Now, I want to make this clear at the onset. This video isn't going to be some kind of unedited podcast format. I've established a standard of quality for this channel, and this video will be no exception. So even though it's a little different from what you're used to, I hope you can keep an open mind and enjoy the video. Also, a massive shout out to SawmanUK for joining me for this discussion. Let's roll the tape. So we're doing something a little bit interesting today. I'm sitting here with SawmanUK. I would love for you to introduce yourself to the very few people that are watching the channel, if you don't mind.
Oh crap, you put me on the spot.
Putting you on the spot.
I'm SawmanUK. I'm a YouTube content creator. I used to main one MMO, which was The Elder Scrolls Online. And recently I've started branching out and playing a variety of games.
I've been seeing a lot of your content has been, this past year I think especially, has been a lot more variety. I saw that Battlefront video that you did, which I love that game, it's fantastic. But I reached out to you with an idea, sort of a conversational video, an opportunity for a collaboration, and you were receptive, which is awesome. And so we're going to go through and talk about the future of MMOs in 2024, look a little bit back at 2023. You did a lot of work looking at a lot of different games, and so I'd love to kind of get your thoughts collecting everything now that we're beginning a new year, and then we'll see where it goes. There's a ton of stuff happening this year, especially since last year was so stacked for single player games with Baldur's Gate and Alan Wake and all the Game of the Year contenders that happened. I feel like MMOs were quiet in 2023, but they're all spinning up in 2024. There's a lot happening. You know, Mabinogi is getting an Unreal 5 engine update. Like, who the hell wanted that? But it's happening. So if I could put you on the spot one more time. Talk to me a little bit about your experience with MMOs last year. It seems like you did quite a lot of different stuff. Were there any MMOs that you spent a lot of time in? Any memorable moments that stuck out to you?
So I want to go back and check out some of the older MMOs because I've always heard about them but never had a chance to properly play them.
Yeah.
So I looked at quite a few classic ones such as Lord of the Rings Online, Neverwinter. I played WoW for the first time because everyone was playing hardcore WoW, and I went and played that, and that was an experience in itself.
There's a few things there that I want to pin you on for a bit. Can I have you talk a little bit about the Lord of the Rings? Because that MMO has been fascinating to me. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. My first tattoo is the engraving on the ring around my left forearm, the Black Speech of Mordor. And I'm a huge fan, but I never could get into that MMO. Could you run me a little bit through how you felt about that game? Because I've tried real hard.
Yeah, so it was actually quite early on in the start of last year. So in terms of my experience with other MMOs, it was still quite immature, I guess. So the fact that it's a free-to-play game, and I'd actually berated one of my friends before about it, saying it's a dead game. There's probably only about 10 people on the server. And then when I went and played it, I was actually kind of surprised. There's still like a large community who play. There's still like a Twitch community, and even the devs will like stream themselves playing. But going into it, it's definitely like an old school MMO with like tab targeting, no real dodge mechanics, just like run away when you're in trouble. And they have like a lot of cool concepts which you don't always see in modern MMOs. So they actually had like housing, for instance. And this is a game which is like, I can't remember how old it was. It's over 10 years old. It's like a proper old school MMO.
It's somewhere around 15 years old, I think, at this point.
Probably about that. But it's at the time as well where everyone was trying to make an MMO, and they all seemed to like choose these different franchises. So it's the same time as like Star Wars Galaxy. There was a few others, but my mind's gone blank.
I mean, Warhammer Online was a big one, I think in 2008. Just a few years after.
Dungeons and Dragons Online as well.
Yeah. There was a time, there was a mad rush. It's a little, well, people lament that we don't have a ton of new releases in the MMORPG space. I frequent r/MMORPG all the time, and everyone's like, there are no new releases, there's nothing to look forward to. And I remember when there were 7 new releases every year, and that wasn't great. That didn't feel very good.
No, they were all very like copy paste, just with like a different skin on top of it.
Exactly. It just didn't seem like we were getting a lot of quality, but certainly a lot of quantity. The Lord of the Rings is fascinating to me because I did play a lot when I was in my adolescence, when I was much younger, and my father played it a ton. And I remember him showing me the housing, and we had a house that we were able to live in for some time, and it was like a shire that we could kind of spend time with, like a whole Hobbit valley, and it was fascinating. It's just every time I go back, it doesn't have that tactile feel that I'm looking for, and I don't know if that's because I've been exposed to a lot of action combat MMOs like Black Desert and Lost Ark, and even World of Warcraft with its action targeting. I've always wanted, this has been in the back of my mind, I've always wanted to explore that game more. But what did you think of it when you kind of finished with Lord of the Rings, when you were done? How did you feel about it?
So I actually really enjoyed streaming it, because a lot of people come and like help me play the game, but also just learn about the lore of Lord of the Rings, because as much as like I'm a fan of Lord of the Rings, I'm only really like a movie and TV series fan. I haven't gone and read the books, which I know is like blasphemy, and I apologize.
I forgive you. But as a book reader, I forgive you completely. It's fine. They are hard to get through, man. The first half of the Fellowship of the Ring is the hobbits running around with Tom Bombadil. Who the hell is that even? No one knows.
But he's in the game. I met him in Lord of the Rings Online.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And I was like, who is this guy?
That's great. I had no idea that he was in the game. That's great. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff. I mean, the novels are beautiful, but man, you're fine. Just watch those movies. They're fantastic. If anybody in the audience is freaking out that you haven't read the books, I'll take the flak for it.
It's fine, because I make up for it, because I've actually like read Game of Thrones on like some people. So, you know, I'm cool in that sense.
I finished that up a few years back in college, man. I was walking around campus with my nose in A Dance with Dragons, which was very dangerous. I should not have been doing that. But I wanted to also pin you on the World of Warcraft. You played World of Warcraft recently for the first time, which is really incredible. I think in the culture of MMOs, most people that are probably close to our age or in our generation started with WoW, or maybe old school RuneScape. I think would be the second option that people would have begun with in the world of MMOs. So it's really interesting to get the perspective of somebody that may have been newer to that ecosystem. Can you tell me a bit about that experience and what were your thoughts? There should have been, or there may have been, a lot of preconceived notions that you had because of how much WoW dominates the conversations. Did any of those pan out, or were they incorrect?
Well, everything I knew about WoW was from that one South Park episode.
Yeah.
The one thing I knew about WoW was from that one South Park episode, and everyone's really hypercritical about that episode. Who, like, anyone who's played WoW will go, "Wow, that's nothing like the game." So it was a bit of a surprise going into it. It's definitely very dated in the way that it plays and the graphics, but people love that. They call it stylized graphics, right? But the biggest shock to me, and it's going to sound stupid, was the fact that you had to queue up to kill some of the bosses. Otherwise, it's just a free-for-all, because it's like the first hit gets the loot, basically.
Yeah. Like if it's Goldtooth in Elwyn Forest, and it's like, oh, I gotta wait until he spawns, and I hope to God I hit him first.
And that to me was just crazy, and like it was so much chaos around it, especially because when I played WoW, it was during the Hardcore Classic, just like starting to get really popular. So it was almost like playing a new MMO for the first time, because it's just like new players everywhere. So these queues just started to get really big. People would like break down and start shouting at each other, and people had like keybinds on so they could just macro them hitting the boss, and I was just there like hoping I would hit it first, just spamming my abilities and nothing happening. So yeah, that was quite the experience. But overall, I think like the community was like super friendly, and seeing people work together because we all had the same goal, which was not to die and just to level up. I mean, that was like, it's a chaotic mess, but it's a good chaotic mess.
Right, it's that MMO kind of feel, that real massively multiplayer thing that I think
it felt social.
Right.
Yeah, it actually felt like an MMO, not just like a single player experience, even though technically you're supposed to be playing on your own, but it's just super social.
Yeah, not to get too ahead of myself, because this is something that we should discuss later too, but a lot of the modern games, even games that released 10 years ago, like Final Fantasy XIV, for example, is shuffling you through a series of loading screens. Like it's like an institution rather than this like social space. And I love 14. It's like my favorite MMO on the market, but I have my little pet criticisms of it. Now, there are, I think, 5 running versions of World of Warcraft. Did you play with any of the other ones, like SOD or just the modern version?
No, I haven't touched any of those yet. I think I'm going to try and do retail WoW this year. I'll just like try and build myself up to it, because they've obviously got the expansions coming out. So I think that might be a good time to dip into it.
If you'll have me, I would love to be your guide, because I'm a little bit more familiar with WoW now than I was, let's say, at the beginning of 2023, after I took on this big project to try to get 500 hours under my belt of like the real endgame experience of retail. Because I played WoW growing up, but I only really leveled, and I barely ever did anything in the endgame. And then last year I said, well, how far can I get if I really buckle down and do Mythic Plus and raiding and all the really heavy stuff? And I did, and I'm like a raid leader now, and I'm progging heroic Emerdrasil.
Oh, so you can carry me then when I play WoW.
I can absolutely carry you, 100%. Yes, well, we have a spot for you in our guild whenever you want it. So yeah, let me know whenever you decide to take that leap. I'll guide you, because the game is bloated. It's it's been around for a long time, and they're doing some amazing things with it. For the War Within, I'm really looking forward to some of the structural changes that are coming, but it's a lot. It's not, I don't know, there's something about the new player experience that a lot of MMOs get wrong 14. I just put a video out a few hours ago, actually, about 14.
I saw.
And one of the criticisms that I have about that is a new player experience. It feels like that should be the most important thing for an MMO to get right. And World of Warcraft has tried with, they've introduced this thing called Exile's Reach, where it streamlines the first 10 levels of the game, and it gives you a little bit of information about how combat works and the tonal narrative structure of things, and that's pretty good, but I think they can go further. But yeah, whenever you decide to take that leap, you let me know. I'll be there for you. You've got a spot in my heroic core raid group. Now, there are a lot of other MMOs that have like huge updates that Black Desert had like a convention. I'm not even sure what they call it. There was Loa on for Lost Ark. As we speak, Yoshi P is probably having a panic attack setting up the 14 Fan Fest in Tokyo. Obviously there was BlizzCon, a lot of big, humongous conventions for some of the bigger MMOs on the market. Was there anything that stuck out to you, anything really exciting going into 2024?
Convention-wise, not really, because obviously I don't like to show my face. So when it comes to conventions, I don't really take too much of an interest in them. I'll sometimes like watch the highlights if they have like new announcements and stuff. So I've watched a couple of like the Elder Scrolls Online conventions in the past, but they all seem a bit like gimmicky and don't really appeal too much to me.
I have a series of questions that just popped into my mind from that response alone. So I also don't like to show my face. Can you tell me a little bit about the psychology that informs your decision not to show your face? And then I'll tell you a bit of mine and see if we're on the same page.
Oh, it's easy. People on the internet are weird.
Yeah.
It's simple as that. I just want to be anonymous. I used to have my Instagram open before, so I wasn't like bold about people like finding me. But then like someone like stalked my Instagram, and then like we're like talking about me, and I was just like, yeah, I don't like this. Like, it's okay if I allow you to see it, but if people are going out their way to try and track you down, puts me off. Plus, also, it's hard to be angry at a talking dog. Well, people do manage it, but it's easier, I guess.
I was going to say, you shouldn't underestimate the magnitude of rage that people are willing to express on the internet. Although a talking dog is definitely a solid shield against that. Yeah, I have the exact same thing, is that I'd like a degree of separation between myself and the channel. I don't have the same issue that you have. I haven't garnered as much traffic, but I have gotten a couple of comments that are a little spicy, and I don't mind that as I think as much as the average bear, I can shrug it off and laugh it off. But there is always that concern that people will take things too far. I've heard plenty of stories from people. I mean, even you yourself telling me right now that someone stalked your Instagram. I mean, that degree of separation makes things comfortable, and I like the idea of hitting upload and then kind of turning my computer off, and then I get back to my life. And there's a wall between those two things. With the convention stuff, I can't see myself ever going to like a fan fest for 14 or BlizzCon. I'm not into COVID super spreader events, even though a lot of those happen here.
I probably might go to one in the future, but it would be totally anonymous. I wouldn't tell people I was going, and I'll just take some random pictures just to like freak people out.
You know what you should do is you should wear a dog mask, the exact same. Just print out your dog and just wear it on your face.
Then that crosses over into like some sort of other genre of furriness, and I don't want to be giving people mixed signals, you know.
I think that there's something really exciting about people like congregating in real life about these digital spaces. Can you tell me a little bit about the ESO announcements? I'm very disconnected from that particular ecosystem. ESO is an MMO that I haven't tried. My dad plays it a little bit actually, and he's tried to get me in there. Can you sell me on ESO at all? Can you like tell me anything about ESO that might pique my interest?
Yeah, sure. So in regards to the Elder Scrolls Online, it's something that I obviously played for quite a while. I think I played it pretty much since release, and it's sort of in its own little ecosystem, because when it first came out, it's quite popular. Lots of big names played it, but over time it hasn't really evolved as a game, so it's kind of let its audience down, and the developers haven't put as much effort into the game as they should do, and it's been very heavily monetized in recent time.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know any. Well, so I'm coming at this as a total like a foreigner. This is like a foreign culture that I have no idea about. But for some reason in my head, I had slotted ESO in the same space that I slot something like Final Fantasy XIV, where it's monetization friendly. And the only reason I thought that is because I didn't hear too much about aggressive monetization in ESO. But I'm assuming that that's incorrect.
So one of the biggest problems of the Elder Scrolls Online is that a lot of the nice skins, the nice mounts, the nice costumes, they're all paywalled, but not in the sense of, oh, you have to go to the cash shop and buy it. You have to go to the cash shop, and then you have to purchase these crown crates, they call them, which are essentially gambling crates, which give you a chance to get the costume. And if you get like duplicate items, you can sell them for like the in-game currency, which is like gems, but you don't get that many of them. So essentially, when it comes to trying to get all the best stuff in game, it's behind a paywall, and even that is you have to gamble to get it. So that's why it's like a very predatory monetization system.
I got to tell you, man, I don't like the sound of that. That does not sound good. So how does it feel? Like I've been playing a lot of Lost Ark, right? And I can tell you that there's a little bit of a feeling of like I'm putting my hand in a puddle of mud and just getting dirty on purpose for some reason, because I understand that I am contributing time into an ecosystem that is heavily monetized, aggressively monetized. I mean, some of the streamers that swipe in Lost Ark are spending the equivalent of a down payment on a house here in California to hone their characters from 1608 to 1610 or 1620. It's insane. It's really insane to me, but I still enjoy playing the game. And so there's that kind of cognitive dissonance of like, I don't like what the game is doing, but I like playing the game. How do you reconcile that feeling of like, I don't like ESO's monetization, but maybe I still like the gameplay? What is it about that game that keeps you there, even though the devs are maybe being a little bit predatory with the way that they're trying to extract capital out of their players?
It kept me there for a while, but this year I haven't played it whatsoever. 2023, I just quit the game, and it's down to the fact that there's just not enough rewards. PvP, which is an aspect of MMOs which I really enjoy, they haven't done any updates for that in about 5 years. Oof. So yeah, it was kind of easy just to step away. And in terms of content as well, it gets a bit stale when you keep doing the same game over and over, especially when they're doing no meaningful updates. I stepped away from that, but in regards to like monetization as a whole, I think when it comes to the business model, if you gotta pay for the game, like, okay, you do a one-off payment, $40, you get the game, you play it, that's fine. And maybe they have an in-game cash shop, you can kind of go, okay. If it's a free-to-play game and they have a cash shop, you kind of expect it to be quite pricey, because how else they go keep the game going? But when they do, like, you have to pay for DLC, pay for base game, and a subscription, and then there's stuff you have to buy in the cash shop, which is essentially what ESO is. It's just way too much monetization. They're just trying to like get money from every avenue, and it's something that I don't like in games. So Lost Ark, I've heard it's quite pay to win, but as far as I understand, it's a free to play game, so you don't have to like buy the DLCs. They just give you them for free. So I kind of understand why it's so heavily monetized.
Oh yeah, you truly never have to spend a dime in Lost Ark, but the game is working overtime to make you want to spend a dime. So ESO, from what you're saying, is maybe more monetized like World of Warcraft, where they have like the box price and the expansion and the subscription fee, and then you can buy in-game currency and the cash shop. And so it's closer to WoW than it is to say 14, where you can buy cosmetics in 14, but that's really the extent of it.
Yeah, I mean, technically there's no pay to win in the Elder Scrolls Online. However, if you don't buy the latest chapters and DLCs, then you are going to be missing out. You're not going to be as powerful as other players. There is a pay to win, but it's just like a hidden pay to win.
Can you tell me a bit about how that game, like what the game is? Because if somebody asks like, hey, I heard Lost Ark is this really scummy pay to win game. Yes. What do you do in that game? It's like, well, it's the Legion raids, and the Legion raids are some of the craziest, most fast-paced and heart-pounding combat encounters that I've ever experienced in any MMO. That's the draw, really. So when you can answer that question with Lost Ark very quickly, Legion Raids is the game. What's the game in ESO? Like, what do you do in that game when you're really in there?
So it's evolved over the years, but essentially it's a basic MMO with an Elder Scrolls skin. However, don't expect Skyrim Online, because it doesn't play anything like Skyrim or Oblivion. It's just got some of the lore from that. It's got action combat, there's dungeons, there's Overland, which is super easy, and it's more for people who probably want to go in there, relax, read a bit of lore, and just maybe have that community feel, as opposed to hardcore players who want to be like, e-gaming, like esports, with like super hard raids. I mean, they do have difficult raids, but over time, with like power creep and stuff, with the new items they've added in, it's definitely gone a lot easier.
So 2024, I said earlier, looks like a really exciting year. There's a lot of new releases coming up. There's Throne of Liberty and Blue Protocol, and I don't know if any of them are going to be very good. Light No Fire doesn't look like an MMO per se, but it's something maybe approximating an MMO from Hello Games, a studio that made No Man's Sky. Is there anything in the new year that you're really looking forward to? Maybe an update to an old game or a new release?
This is probably where people are going to judge me the most, but the thing I'm looking forward to the most this year MMO wise has got to be Ashes of Creation Alpha 2. It's supposed to be releasing in Q3. I've literally just bought my Alpha 2 key, which cost me $250.
Holy.
Which I know. Yep, I know.
No, hey, man, I have, I'm a big mobile game player, so, my money has gone places where I try not to talk about too much in public. But hey, I mean, Alpha 2, what are you expecting to see? Because Ashes of Creation has the reputation right now in the MMO space of like, this is the game that's going to save the genre, even though I would argue that the genre is doing great right now, but everyone is really holding Ashes of Creation up with reverence. It's on a pedestal. So what are you expecting to see with this Alpha 2?
In all honesty, I reckon it'll be okay, but not what everyone expects. And it is still obviously an alpha, so I don't think it's going to be like game changing. I just think it's going to give everyone a nice glimpse into what we could expect in the future. I mean, if you look at New World's alpha compared to New World's beta, a lot changed. New World used to have building and all sorts of other stuff. And then when it came to the beta, not so much. They took a lot of it out. So with Ashes of Creation, the fact that it's a persistent alpha gives me hope that, okay, maybe this could be MMO that I invest in over the next couple of years, but I don't know. I'm not too sure what to expect. I'm keeping my expectations low, so I can't be disappointed.
Have you been following a lot of the dev updates? Because I don't know how invested into Ashes of Creation I feel like I am. I have so many games right now that I really love in the MMO space, so I'm not jonesing for something new. But I was looking at how they're doing housing and crafting, and it's pretty complex, and it seems really old school. And there was a thought that I had where a lot of the newest MMOs are veering far away from the idea of strict player interdependency and social spaces. I mean, even 14 for how much it encourages RP and being together in a social space is still, everything's very segmented. I mean, even a basic major city is 2 loading screens, which just sucks. I feel like the genre is going in one direction, even though the most vocal people on r/MMO or on Twitter insist that they want more player interdependency and they want more of this old school feel. Do you think that Ashes of Creation is being canny for trying to bring back that like Ultima Online, Dark Age of Camelot feeling, or do you think that they're maybe missing the market trends?
So I've been following Ashes of Creation for about 2.5 years now. I've got a couple of like content creator friends as well who are deeply into Ashes of Creation. Shout out to Nice Gaming and Is There No One Else. They both do like a podcast on Ashes of Creation every week as well. So I've been following it quite a lot, and I don't know everything about the game, but I'm definitely very close to it. But all of last year as well, part of the reason I wanted to try these different MMOs out was so I can, when it comes to like reviewing Ashes of Creation, I can have a better understanding as to how it works. So I on purposely played like Arcade, Star Wars Galaxies, and Guild Wars 2 because I feel like Arcade and Star Wars Galaxies are inspirations behind Ashes of Creation. I think Guild Wars 2 has a similar feel to how Ashes of Creations could run. So those like were some games that I picked up and played. But the whole PvP or PvX as they call it was a big controversy because some players are obviously dead against that.
It seems like you look at a game like World of Warcraft that had open world PvP at the onset, and it became relegated to this sort of instanced loading screen thing. And then developers have said, I think, and I wish I could find out where this quote came from, but like 10% of the player base engages with this content. It's not as popular as it seems to be if you're like scrolling through forums.
Oh no, exactly. And I think that's the funny thing about Ashes of Creation, right? People are saying it's not going to be popular, people aren't going to enjoy it because it's not like every other MMO. But as someone who's played every other MMO, I want something different. And a good example of this is Mortal Online 2, which is a first-person, full-loop, medieval MMO with like social aspects to it. So there's voice comms everywhere you go, basically. And that has its own little like pocket of people who play it. And there was a large surge of people who went to play it when it first came out, expecting it to be something else, and it didn't quite live up to the hype. And I think that's the same with Ashes of Creation, but on a larger scale. There is a huge pocket of people who want that old school, but a more social, and they want PvP, but not like mindless killing people all the time, but have that risk of, oh, if someone pisses you off, you could just kill them. I mean, that's a nice feeling. If someone's stealing your resources, you can just go up and kill them. I think that's what Ashes of Creation is like doing really well. They are separating themselves from just being another MMO.
Yeah. Sawman, are you a gambling man?
Yeah. I mean, I've paid $250 for an alpha on a game which doesn't exist, so yeah.
All right. Just gut check right now off the top of your head for 1,000 Monopoly dollars. When is Ashes of Creation coming out?
So if the Alpha 2 comes out this year, I'd expect the beta to be the year after. So potentially 2026.
Okay, 2026. I'm gonna bet 2027. So we'll come back in a few years and we'll see which one of us was right, and then whoever wins will get 1,000 Monopoly dollars from the other person. How about that?
Sounds good.
Speaking of gut checks, a couple of the new releases that I mentioned before. Any thoughts on Throne and Liberty? It's a Korean MMO, Amazon Games publishing here in the West. It had a really terrible reputation for a few months at the beginning of the year because of the static combat and concerns about pay to win. It seems like the pay to win is going to be there. It's from Korea, so you can expect that. But attitudes are shifting and becoming more positive. Have you been following Throne and Liberty? Is this something that you're interested in at all this year?
So I actually did a video about Throne and Liberty before they did their first beta, and everyone thought the combat was going to be this action combat. It looked like really cool. It looked like it was going to be Unreal Engine 5, and then obviously everyone played the beta, and yeah, that was kind of disappointing. I think the problem is with this game, from my memory, it's been in development for like 17 years, and at one point it was a ARPG, so it's no surprise that it's been delayed so often, and even now like they're trying to change it about. I think it's probably a lost cause at this point, simply because they've just invested too much time into it and they haven't stuck to one direction. It looks good. I like the idea of it, but it's just gonna be failure at launch. And I would be surprised as well if it's a free-to-play game when it comes out and they just try and like heavily monetize it.
Right, and you mentioned that it's been in development for a very, very long time. There is going to be pressure internally to recuperate some of those costs. And without a box price or a paywall just to get into the game, can you even begin to imagine how aggressive some of that monetization is going to be to try to recuperate the hundreds of millions that they've obviously sunk trying to get this game out? I mean, I think that the game looks beautiful, and it even looked like the user interface is really slick. That's an important thing. I mean, my home game being 14, the user interface in that game is abysmal. It's horrible. I hate how it works. There are only a few UIs in the MMO space that I think are solid. I mean, WoW's UI, for feeling a little bit cheap and a little bit plastic, is at least thematically consistent, and it loads quickly. The UI in Throne and Liberty stuck out to me as like, those look like menus that I could stare at for a while. And the particle effects are, I mean, if it's Unreal Engine 5, then it's obviously going to be beautiful. But it's at the heart of it. Whatever is at the heart of that game, that I just don't know if it's going to have that draw. Now, I'm susceptible to the Korean kind of game design because I seem to be unable to quit Lost Ark despite my better judgment. So who knows? Maybe I'll be a little bit more of a champion of it in the future. But it does have that stink of like, ooh, they're going to want to sell you a $900 swimsuit for your your sorceress or something. Now, a game that I think is looking really rough is Blue Protocol. Have you been following this at all?
Not too much. I've seen a little bit of it. Was that the one that's supposed to be like a Warframe, where it's like instant dungeons, like 4-man dungeons, but then they have like a player hub? Is that the same one? Or
yeah, it appears to be that way. It's got so it's like an anime style, and it looks like you kind of are moving through instance sections of the world, and there's a lot of loading screens, and yeah, there's a player hub. One of the things that I'd mentioned before was sort of market trends with game development. And so Blue Protocol doesn't look interesting to me, but what is interesting to me is the game design of newer MMOs and what that might mean for the future. For example, we have some indication of the MMO that Ghostcrawler is working on. Have you been following that at all?
I'm trying to remember what it's called.
I don't even know if I think he may have given it a name, but he had mentioned how it's a hub-based MMO. We just got Wayfinder, for example, that I believe is also a hub-based MMO. One is a coincidence, twice begins to look like a pattern. Is this the future of MMOs, and do we want more hub-based design for world building in this genre? I
think the issue that we have is simply the term MMO. When people hear that, they tend to like jump to a certain like vision of like an MMORPG, like WoW, for instance. But realistically, it's such a loosely used term that you can use it to describe a lot of games. I mean, technically, if you look at Fall Guys, for instance, that could be considered MMO because it's massively multiplayer and online. There's 50 players in a lobby all playing together, right? But we know full well we wouldn't call it MMO because it's something else. So I think people use that term just to try and like ramp up sales. And like, have you ever looked at MMO population? Like, it's the website where it tells you how many players are supposedly playing these games,
right? And it's completely fraudulent, right? There's no way any of that is
the worst website in the world.
Yeah,
but they have Baldur's Gate 3 on there as an MMO, and you just think, how? It's 4 players at most,
right?
And I think that's the problem. Like, the term MMO has just lost all meaning in the gaming sphere, So when they call something, oh yeah, it's an MMO, but it's only 4 players and it's instance dungeons and it has a player hub, I don't consider a player hub to be a true MMO.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's something important about the consistent open space, which is something that lacks in, I mean, I feel like I've said this 4 times already, but 14 really lacks that feeling of a consistent open space. You can be in the main city and see a ton of people and you get that feeling, but then you go out in the world and it feels a bit empty because everything's so segmented. And so you lose that. And that MMO came out in its relaunch version 10 years ago. And so these trends seem to have been planted many years ago, and they're only just kind of coming to fruition now because of the long development cycles. And I wonder to some extent how much are technical limitations in play here. I mean, we're talking about having to make sure that everything, like the environments and the enemies and the artificial intelligence of the enemies and all the animations are rendering, all the while it's happening consistently with 1,000 people in a server, sharing a space. I mean, that must be harder and harder to pull that off as time goes on, and these games have to look better and play better and have more features. And so I wouldn't want that to be the direction, but I'm seeing, as I'm looking around, that seems to be the way that newer developers are going. And I certainly hope not. I mean, this is probably why everyone wants Ashes of Creation to come out. It's the savior if it's going to be a more consistent open world MMO. But you had mentioned something that I want to stick to for a minute. We can call anything an MMO. Right?
Yeah.
I kind of want to play a little game with you. Can we try to define MMORPG at the very least, and see if a couple of games that people call MMORPGs, or have heard people call MMORPGs, apply? So what are the parameters? What are the restrictions? What does an MMORPG need to have in order to be an MMORPG?
So I've actually seen someone do this before with Call of Duty. They called Call of Duty a MMO because it had player leveling, it was massively online. There was like achievements and rewards the more you grind. And I think, I get what you're doing. You can like kind of apply it to a lot of things. But I think like the baselines are you have to have like a open, I don't want to say player hub, but a map or zone that everyone can socialize in with text chat or voice chat. There needs to be some sort of cross communication. So for instance, the first Destiny had a player hub and players would just stand around and emote at each other, but you couldn't actually talk to each other. In fact, you couldn't even like talk to each other to arrange going to a dungeon. You had to use like an outside app. So MMO for me, I think the basics are more than 20 players in a like instance. So like a social hub, we'll call it, but the social hub has to be social. You have to be able to talk to each other, and there has to be progression, but it also has to be like a long progression, like almost like a grind to it. There also needs to be a variety of builds, I guess. So like different like play styles and different ways to play, not just all generic.
Do you think that combat design has something to do with it too? Because for a long time, one of the defining features of an MMO was the tab targeting combat design. And that's becoming less common now, so that muddies the waters even more. But for, let's say, between 2004 and maybe 2015, with all the different MMOs being released in that time, one of the unifying factors was, hey, you have to hit tab and target something, and you can still cleave, and there are AoE abilities, and so you can hit a lot of enemies at once, but you're always looking at one thing at a time, one NPC at a time of any kind. Would that have been a qualifying feature of an MMO at some point? And do you think that maybe that's kind of been dissolved now with the way that Black Desert and Lost Ark and Wayfinder are playing?
So this is quite controversial. I hate tab targeting. I prefer the action combat. I know.
Oh my god, everyone duck for cover. Hot takes.
I can play tab targeting games, but for me, I'm evolved past that now. I'm a better human being. I can do action combat. Mainly because as well, I used to be like a console pleb for quite some time. So, tab targeting doesn't exist on console.
Right.
When you go and play console, you want action gameplay. So, yeah, I like my MMOs like action based.
So for you, we're thinking shared space with the ability to communicate and form groups, and like a long tail progression in order to qualify as an MMO.
Yeah.
I don't think I can disagree with that. It's tough because you're right, like you said, I mean, by all accounts, Call of Duty is an MMORPG, although you have to use third-party things to communicate. If we apply those those limiters, I think, to the definition, it starts to thin out some things. So I want to throw a couple of titles at you, and I want you to tell me if by your definition, it's an MMORPG. Grand Theft Auto 5 Online.
It has an awful cash shop, so by that merit, it should be an MMORPG because it's heavily monetized. It's great like that.
No fishing though. I feel like fishing is a big deal. You gotta be able to fish in an MMO.
True, but it has got a lot of fashion, and everyone knows fashion is endgame and housing.
True. You'd spoken like a real 14 player. Okay, so GTA 5, what's the verdict?
I would call it an MMORPG because there's even quests and stuff you can go to.
Okay, all right. So GTA 5 MMO, Genshin Impact.
This is very controversial. I haven't played it.
That's totally fine. Let me give you a couple of things. There are some online hubs you can see other players in the game. Not many. I think you can only see up to 4, so it's like Baldur's Gate in that way. But I think region-wide matchmaking for dungeons. They're not called dungeons, but it's effectively what it is. There is housing. There is definitely a lot of character progression, long tail character progression, equipment, upgrading, things like that. Heavy narrative, cooking, fishing. I mean, it's got all the things. What do you think? With all that in front of you, do you think that Genshin Impact would qualify, or is the fact that it's so small as far as who you can see in the world, is that disqualifying?
I know it's got the gambling, so that's obviously MMORPG. Yeah. But if we called Genshin Impact an MMORPG, it makes Tower of Fantasy pointless. So I don't know. I'm not going to call it an MMORPG. Because it's only 4 players as well, isn't it? It's like 4 players at a given time.
I think that's the thing that would disqualify. But by if they had 20 players available in one space, and they could at this point. I mean, that game has developed a lot since I last played it, so who knows? I could be totally wrong, and people in the comments could certainly correct me on this. But last time I played, you could only see 3 other players at once. So I think you're right. I feel like Genshin Impact loses the qualification on that point alone. What about Destiny?
See, this is one which is very controversial because. Okay, so Destiny 1 definitely wasn't, but they tried to be. Destiny 2, I know they've upped their game quite a lot. I don't know how social it is, though, in situations. I still don't know if it's still like 6 people per instant. I would love for it to be an MMORPG, but I just don't know enough about it.
I played a little bit of Destiny 2, and I remember that there was like a hub that you would hang out in, and you could see a lot of other players. You couldn't really do anything with them, though. There wasn't a lot of interaction, and I think that might be the sticking point.
Yeah, the toxicity on that game is enough for it to be an MMORPG.
I really appreciate that you. I'm thinking about like the features, and you're like, oh well. That's a grubby cash shop and the people suck, so it definitely is an MMO.
Even Destiny players will know it's a toxic game. It's brilliant in that sense. I do want to play it, but yeah, I don't think I can't count it as an MMORPG. Actually, no, I don't want the hate. It's an MMO. they can have it.
You're afraid. They struck the fear of the Destiny community in your heart. They must be toxic, man.
They are scary people. There's a few communities who are trying not piss off. Number 1 is the Final Fantasy XIV community. I've seen those people. They are ruthless. Destiny 2 community is exactly the same, and after playing Black Desert Online, those guys I will just not touch. There's
only a couple of things that I want to go over. I don't want to keep you too much longer because I feel like I've had you here. I've been having a good time, but a couple of things before we start to wrap everything up. First off, I've mentioned that 14 is sort of my home game, and I've been playing it for a really long time. What's your experience with 14? Have you played it at all? Are you interested in playing it if you haven't?
I played it at the start of last year, and my goal was to recreate Vivi from Final Fantasy IX.
Oh, yeah.
So I went a Black Mage, which apparently is the worst decision if you're a new player. Because
I got to tell you that is a mistake, yeah.
And the mistake is that apparently it's boring to play that class. So I got to like level 30, and I got bored and stopped playing. But I did want to play it, and I do intend to go back, but it's just the new player experience for me so far hasn't been the best.
You are another person who has been a victim of this phenomenon with 14, and it is a phenomenon, and I think it is a widespread phenomenon. Something about level 30 or like the space around level 30 in A Realm Reborn is the make or break moment, because when I discovered Final Fantasy, that's about when I quit. It took me like 9 months to get through A Realm Reborn because I would start and stop on account of how boring it was. I just didn't want anything to do with all these text boxes. There was no gameplay really in the journey, and I wasn't bought into the story that they were trying to tell me. You buy in if the game is going to get you. You buy in during the post patches of A Realm Reborn, which is level 50, and then you do a bunch of quests at level 50, and then you start Heavensward, and it's a very long process. But at that point, I was like, oh, I have to know what happens next, and that motivation drove me all the way to the end of Endwalker. But that happened to you. That happened to I don't know if you're familiar with the YouTuber Mr. Matty Plays. I did I did an interview with him on his podcast, and he said the same thing. He's like, yeah, I got to about level 30 and I quit out. There's something about that part of the game that just sucks. And I have to tell you, the gameplay does get a little bit better. There are some like story-based duties that you do that are much more innovative than just like go kill 3 things here or just go talk to this person. It does improve, but the primary motivator is the narrative. and how the narrative informs the mandatory dungeons that you do every other level as you level up. I remember there was a moment in the middle of Heavensward where I had to do a dungeon and I realized, oh, I know why I'm doing this dungeon. I know like the motive behind why we need to get through this anyway. Like having that intrinsic sort of a motivation was really unique to just like you're leveling a character in World of Warcraft and you're just queuing up for dungeons for the experience and you just blast through them for no reason. It was the first time I'd ever felt that. We're like, oh wow, I know why this is happening. I care about what's happening and I can't wait to see what happens next. So that can happen, but dude, that level 30, something about that. There's something wrong there, and they really need to fix that part of A Realm Reborn because you and like 7 people I've talked to have all hit that wall at that point.
I think the issue for me as well is if you play an MMO, you kind of want to be rewarded at the start and get that dopamine hit of like, oh, I'm leveling up, this feels good, I'm getting more powerful. It just never seemed to come with Final Fantasy XIV. It was just like, I don't know, it just seemed to stay static. And I know it sounds really stupid as well. I think if you are going to play like a game for the first time and like the part of the world that you land in is just a desert to begin with. So like the area I was in, I can't remember where it was. It was just like a remote desert. I was like, oh.
You must have started in Thanalan, near the city of Ul'dah. I sound like such a nerd right now. But yeah. I know exactly where you were. And that part of the game sucks. I would always recommend starting in Gridania or in Limsalam or Lenosha in the pirate coastal city. Those are a little bit nicer to look at. But honestly, dude, it's not much better. It is such a dry experience. And you're right. MMO players have this need for function fulfillment more than an intrinsic experience. I can get a really great intrinsic experience out of Baldur's Gate 3 when I go to play it on my PlayStation 5 in the living room because I don't do a lot of gameplay, but I'll play for half an hour and I'll get an amazing performance and maybe like a really cool combat encounter, and that feels more intrinsic than what I would expect to get out of an MMO. When I play Lost Ark, I'm playing it because I'm trying to be a degen and I like to see the numbers go up. I'm not in there first, and even they insist on telling you a story, which is insane. But 14 has that issue. You really have to buy in, and the game is not trying to meet you halfway. But if you decide to go through it and you want to talk about your experience with the story, dude, I would love to. The story is amazing. It's the best story I've ever experienced in an MMO or in a game, and it's better than most media I've seen. Like I've mentioned this in a video that in this chair that I'm sitting in right now, I was crying tears of joy at the end of Endwalker. Like I have never had that kind of emotion.
So I like Final Fantasy for the story. Like I loved 7, loved 8, loved 9. Wasn't the biggest fan of 10. And then was it 15 when they went to the action combat?
Yeah.
Which I just didn't really enjoy that. So I had like high hopes for 14, but I don't know, something about it just didn't like connect. It might be because it's trying to be a MMO as opposed to being like an RPG. Maybe the early game just isn't that great and it'll get better later on. But I will revisit it 100%. Like it's a game I definitely want to go back to.
I will keep an eye on your channel if you make some content, and then I'll pester you to sit down and talk with you again, because it's worth talking about, man. But the story is so precious to FF14 players that like I'm not willing to divulge any details about it. Like I think it's important to have that singular experience, and if it doesn't do it for you, then it's okay. But if you buy in and you go through that whole journey, it happens once, it never happens again, and you get to carry that with you for the rest of your life, and you get to know, holy crap, like there was no reason for that to be that good. I'll never forget the night that I finished the main quest of Shadowbringers. I was like, my jaw dropped and I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next day I woke up and I immediately got on YouTube and I had to know what everybody was reacting to about it and how they felt about it. And it really is incredible, but you gotta buy in. So not to make this a Final Fantasy XIV thing, I want to wrap things up here. I don't want to keep you too much longer. I know it's probably getting late over there for you. Although you said you have a crazy sleep schedule, so I don't know.
Oh yeah, I'm a night owl now. It's all good.
Okay, great. But out of respect, I want to kind of wrap things up with a quick gut check on your content creation going into 2024. Do you have any big goals, any games you want to play, things you want to revisit? Tell me a little bit about how you're feeling now that we're going into the new year.
There's a lot of games I want to go and check out. There's like a few old school ones that I just didn't get to play last year. So EVE Online and Star Wars The Old Republic, 2 really old games but still popular, definitely in 2 different states as well. They're like a couple I want to check out. And also I want to try and hit on like some more retro games. So I never played Fallout New Vegas, which is like a huge RPG that people rave on about all the time. And also, sounds silly, but GTA Vice City. Like it's such like a retro game now that I'd love to go back and play it, because it's one of the first GTAs I like bought myself, and it was an 18 game, but I was like 15 at the time. I was like, ooh, breaking the law, and it's one of the games that stuck with me the most. But yeah, content-wise, just more of the same, really. Just try out different MMOs, try out different RPGs, and try and broaden my horizons. But mainly, waiting on Ashes of Creation Alpha 2.
I hope that comes out, and I hope it's everything you hope for and more.
I hope it comes out.
Well, Sawman, thank you so much for joining me for this talk. This has been a lot of fun. I hope you had a good time too. Why don't you plug everything that you've got so that they know where to find you?
Mainly just YouTube. Just find me on YouTube. That's the one-stop shop for everything.
I'll have a link to your channel in the comments in the event that this gets an inordinate amount of viewers. And my channel doesn't do too bad for how small it is. So hey, who knows?
Hey, good channel. It's an enjoyable channel. It's up and coming one, which you should definitely all watch, because it will overtake me in subs in probably next year.
If we keep doing things like this, then I think the rising tide lifts all boats, or whatever the expression is. Well, thank you again, man. I really appreciate it. This has been super, super fun. Hopefully we can do something like this again in the future if you're down. But I'm gonna hit the big red button and stop the recording. So thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good one.
Cheers, guys.